got my little Lambo mug that I got from Italy back in 2019, if you guys remember that vlog series. But I'm just gonna keep that right here. And let's get on with this video. Alrighty guys, so in today's video, I'm gonna be finally giving my final review on the Canon EOS R5, which I'm filming on right now. So let's get into it. What is up guys? If you guys are new to my channel, my name is Anish, Rajah. I do a lot of cinematic videos, cinematic vlogs, unboxings, things like that. So if you guys are interested into those types of videos, make sure to hit that subscribe button down below. And yeah, so we are going to get into the Canon EOS R5's review. But before I get into the R5's review, can I just say that 2020 is like the year of cameras. Like again, from Canon, Blackmagic, and Sony, we are getting some incredible cameras. From Canon, we are getting the EOS R5, which is a full frame mirrorless camera which can do 8K RAW, which is just crazy to me because like I never even imagined that people could do 8K and even this form factor. No one even expected back like 2-3 years ago that we would get a camera like this. And then from Blackmagic, we are getting an immense 12K cinema camera. Like this is also really crazy because it can do 12K at 60 frames per second and 8K at 100 frames per second, which is mind-blowing. And also, the price of it is actually super cheap for what it is. It's only 10 grand. And for people that think 10 grand is like really expensive, honestly, it's not, especially for a lot of cinematographers. 10 grand is actually pretty cheap when it comes to an actual cinema camera, because if you guys do take a look at Red's lineup with their Red Monstro 8K cameras, those ones usually go for like 50 grand. While with this one, not only are you getting way more resolution and also higher frame rates as well, but it's like 40 grand cheaper. So, I mean again, like sometimes it might just make sense to go with Blackmagic. And finally from Sony, we are getting one camera that people have been waiting for like the past 5 years from, especially with the amazing Sony a7S Mark II. Finally, they released the Sony a7S Mark III, which again, might just be one of my favorite Sony cameras that have ever come out, especially when it comes for video. Like, again, we're getting improved color science, higher bitrate in 4K, we're getting external 16-bit 4K RAW, better dynamic range, and also a fully articulating screen. So pretty much everything that I was kind of unsure of whether or not I should go to Sony has been finally fixed with the a7S III. So again, a great camera, and a great camera from just pretty much all of these different manufacturers. And 2020 has been a year for cameras, so I'm just saying that. But besides that, I'm going to be getting into the Canon EOS R5's review. First, we're going to be talking about the pros of why I think this camera is really good. Then we're going to get into the cons, since there are quite a bit of cons with this camera. I'll talk a little bit more of the reason why I am deciding to keep my R5, and also a few questions that I got about the Canon EOS R5. So the first pro about the Canon EOS R5 is that if you guys are a photographer and you guys have like a Canon 5D Mark IV, maybe even like an EOS RP, EOS R, or just like an older Canon camera, again, this camera is going to be so worth it for you guys to upgrade, because this is probably one of Canon's best photography cameras that are out there. I mean, you're getting an immense 45 megapixel sensor, which is really good, especially if you guys are going to be cropping in a lot into your photos to get a certain frame, or if you guys are going to be putting it on big billboards and advertising it to a lot of different places. And guys, another great reason why this camera is amazing for photographers is especially the dual pixel autofocus version 2. Now, I remember when I first had my hands on the Canon EOS R5 when it came out, I thought that the autofocusing on that camera was amazing. When I was using the Canon EOS R5's autofocusing, it was on a whole different level. Like, we were talking about like, it is like so much faster to pick up stuff. And not only is it really good to pick up autofocusing for people, but also when it comes to wildlife photography, wildlife videography, you guys will also be extremely happy about this, because even like, if you guys are trying to capture birds flying in the air, like literally the autofocusing system can pick up their eyeball like extremely fast. Birds, land animals, and also guys, it can even pick up fish, which is crazy. So for people that do take pictures of fish and also some videos of them, like it can literally track their eyeball the entire time. And also some people might even take pictures of insects. It can literally track onto an insect's eye, which is incredible. So if you guys are curious about the autofocusing, honestly, probably one of the best autofocusing systems that I have ever seen on any camera. Next up is something that Canon users have been wanting for such a long time, and that is we are finally getting in-body image stabilization within both the R5 and the R6. And especially with the R5, it has up to 8 stops of IBIS within this camera. So for people that have been complaining like, oh, they only do like digital image stabilization and things like that, we are finally getting actual in-body image stabilization within this camera. Now there have been like a few people that have been saying that the IBIS is like really strong, especially with the lens that I use, which is the 15-35. And honestly, the one way to fix that is just by turning off that stabilizer mode, especially if you are going to be vlogging with it. If you guys are probably doing like a lot of like B-roll, like 4K 60, 4K 120, then you guys can keep the stabilizer on. I don't think it's gonna make too much of a difference. But especially if you guys are vloggers and you guys do have the RF 15-35 like myself, I just recommend you guys to turn off that stabilizer button so that it will turn off the IBIS within the lens, but the IBIS within the camera will, I think it'll still continue, or it might not continue. But still, you guys won't get that IBIS wobble anymore. So if you guys want a solution, just turn off that button. Now guys, another great reason why you guys should go into the Canon R series, especially with the Canon EOS R, RP, even the RA, the R6, and also the R5, is because of the new Canon RF lenses. Like, these lenses are by far some of the best lenses I've ever seen, that have been made, especially with this 15-35, for example. Like, this lens is one of the very first lenses that we are getting a extremely nice wide angle lens at an f2.8 that is image stabilized, because I think the only other lens, especially with this focal length, that was stabilized was the EF 16-35, but it wasn't an f2.8, it was an f4. So not only are we getting a faster aperture, but we are getting image stabilization built in inside of the lens. So definitely the technology on these new RF lenses are incredible, and obviously, especially if you guys do have older Canon glass, like EF glasses, EFS, things like that, you guys can get the RF to EF lens adapter, and you guys can practically use all of your older glass on the new R series cameras without hardly any issues. And guys, one of the biggest reasons why this might just be worth it, especially for Canon EOS R users, is because if you guys were kind of sad that you guys couldn't shoot full frame 4K in 24 or 30 or even 60 for that matter, since the EOS R did have that 1.73 inch crop, you guys don't have to worry about that anymore, because both the R5 and the R6 can shoot full frame 4K, 24, 30, 60, and 120. So again, if you guys really did want that full frame 4K, I would definitely say it's worth to upgrade to the R5 or R6. But if you guys are perfectly fine using 1080p 24, 30, and 60, then I would probably say you guys can stick to the EOS R and obviously save up your money for other stuff. Before I get into the cons of the R5, I just want to talk a bit more about other people's reviews with the R5. And a lot of people were talking about the Canon R5's 4K, especially just the standard 4K. Now, I've seen a lot of other people like Gerald Undone and so many other YouTubers that have been comparing the standard 4K to the 4K HQ mode by cropping it in like 3, 4, even 500% into the image. And my thing is, it is good to know these things, it's good to test them out. But if people are going to be complaining about, the EOS R5's 4K not being as sharp as a 4K HQ, my thing is, if you guys really are planning to get more of a telephoto look, one, just invest in more telephoto, lenses, especially you guys can go for the 70-200, 100-500. If you guys even need more than that, just go with the RF, 600 or even the RF 800. But if you guys are gonna continue to criticize the R5's 4K just because it's not as sharp as a 4K HQ, then I don't know, you guys should just get a cinema camera for that matter. Just don't get into cameras if that's your case. If you guys are gonna be cropping in 3 to 4 to even 500% into your video, then one, just don't get the R5, go with the cinema camera for that matter, or just don't get a camera at all if you have that issue. Because even for my type of videos, I don't crop in that much. Maybe I might do some crop ins, if I'm making a joke or an important statement, something like that I might crop in. But other than that, I'm not gonna crop in over 50% into my video. Alright guys, so one of the first cons that I want to talk about the EOS R5 is that it is not an 8K camera. Now, I know that Canon has been marketing the Canon EOS R5, mainly just the R5 as a filmmaking camera, which is one of the biggest reasons why I was super interested in the R5. It's not only just because I have Canon EF lenses, but also because, you know, they were gearing it as a filmmaker tool, which is one of the biggest reasons why I wanted to pick it up. But obviously when I was using it, especially if I wanted to use those higher modes, I didn't have much time to use it. But especially if I just wanted to do, you know, just regular standard 4K 24, or even some 1080p modes for that matter, like this camera would never overheat. So again, if you guys are planning to use those higher modes, like the higher frame rates or the higher resolution, then you guys are definitely going to want to be strategic about it. But also, if you guys are thinking about picking up this camera because it can do 8K and you guys just want an 8K camera, trust me, do not buy this camera. It is not for you guys, because if you guys do want an 8K camera, go with like a red camera, or obviously you guys might even want to think about picking up that new Blackmagic camera, especially with that 12K sensor. Now guys, another con with the R5 is especially the recording limits and obviously how the overheating affects those recording limits. Now there's a whole ton of controversy with this issue right now because people have been obviously tearing down this camera and figuring out some of the reasons why this camera is overheating. Now the case is that the R5 isn't necessarily like actually super hot in your hands. The thing is, especially even if you do record for a long period of time, or even if you guys do record in those higher frame rates or the higher resolution, the overheating is an artificial limit created by Canon. And I believe one of the biggest reasons why they probably put that artificial limit is so that people don't overuse you know, the higher frame rate or the higher resolution, purely just because if they do overuse that thing, then it could burn the sensor, it could melt the sensor, it could damage the camera in certain ways. So I'm pretty sure that's the reason why Canon did put that limit. But especially with what the Canon EOS R5 can do, I feel like it shouldn't be as strict as it is currently. But I do believe that Canon is working on some firmware updates to pretty much just lower down the waiting times that we have to use a camera again once it's done with its overheating process. So I do believe Canon is working on that. Now guys, especially when it comes to those recording limits, I think one of the biggest ones that just hits me a lot is especially even just in the standard 4K 24, it still has that 30-minute record limit, which just, it doesn't make any sense to me, because the thing is, even after 30 minutes, the thing is you can still record with this camera. And honestly, I think you can record 4K 24 as long as up till either the CF Express card gets filled up or the battery dies. So honestly, Canon, I don't think there's a reason why you guys need to have that 30-minute record limit within the standard 4K. And if you guys can implement that within your new firmware, highly would appreciate it. Now another con with the R5 that people were having was the dynamic range with the camera, since pretty much the dynamic range with the R5 is very similar to the EOS R, and there isn't that much of an improvement within the dynamic range. However, if you guys are shooting in that 8K RAW mode, there is definitely more dynamic range to work with. I think it's roughly 13 to 14 stops. So if you guys do want that higher dynamic range, I'd probably say to shoot in 8K RAW, but again, you guys probably can't record too much in that mode because otherwise it'll practically overheat, and then you guys can't use the higher frame rates for that much longer, and you guys will have to wait for that camera to cool down. But I do believe that Canon is going to be implementing C-Log 3 within the R5, so hopefully with C-Log 3 it will definitely give us a bit more extra dynamic range to work with. Hopefully it can give us roughly 13 to 14 stops of dynamic range. And I think one of the last things that people were saying was that if this camera can do 8K RAW, it should also be able to do 4K RAW. So again, Canon, if you guys want to implement that, I think you guys should be able to implement it. So again, I guess that's one con. It's not too big of a con for me, but I guess for some people that do want to shoot 4K RAW, you know, that's also, you know, a slight con as well. So guys, after talking about both the pros and cons of the R5, I'm going to tell you guys the reason of why I'm deciding to stick with this camera. And you guys can tell in the title down below that the reason why I'm saying is that this camera could potentially be a perfect hybrid. Now the reason why I'm saying it could potentially be a perfect hybrid is because it's all up to Canon right now, especially with those firmware updates. As I said again, I'm hoping that Canon will definitely do something, especially with those, especially with the overheating, the recording limits. Hopefully giving us more dynamic range to work with, and also hopefully can give us, you know, a higher frame rate mode in 1080p, like 120 or even possibly 240 frames per second. I feel like a lot of us, especially videographers and filmmakers, would really love to see that implemented with it in camera, and you know, pretty much just all of the other firmware bugs, especially since the camera doesn't work with the webcam utility beta. So hopefully with the newer firmware update, it can hopefully fix all the issues that we had with the R5, but all it comes down to now is Canon and what they're going to do with the firmware. Alright guys, so now that we got all of those things out of the way, I'm going to get into some of the questions that I got about the Canon EOS R5. So one of the first questions that I got is that should Canon users that do have cameras such as the EOS R, 5D Mark IV, or even a 1DX camera, should they switch to the Canon EOS R5? Now for people that do have the EOS R, as I did say earlier in this video, if you guys want to shoot in that full frame 4K, 24, 30, even 60, and have some novelty features like 4K 120 and even 8K RAW, then I would definitely say it's worth to upgrade to the R5, especially when it comes to photographers with the EOS R. Again, it really depends on you guys. If you guys aren't satisfied with that autofocus from the EOS R, then maybe the R5 is good to check out for you guys. But definitely when it comes to, you know, resolution, it shouldn't be too different since both of them do have high megapixels. The EOS R has a 30.3 megapixel while the Canon EOS R5 has a 45 megapixel sensor. So again, when it comes to photography, if you guys aren't satisfied with that autofocusing from the original R, then it might be worth taking a look at the R5's dual pixel autofocus version 2. Now for those that were having the 5D Mark IV and thinking about whether they should switch to the R5, I would definitely recommend them to switch, especially since you guys are going to be getting a 45 megapixel sensor, way better autofocusing, and also way more video features. It would just make sense for you guys to switch to the R5. And also, again, if you guys are worried about your accessories, again, pretty much all of your accessories will work with the R5, especially since you guys can get the RF to EF lens adapter, and also the batteries are the exact same, because with the Canon EOS R5 and the R6, you guys can use your LPE6, LPE6N batteries on the Canon EOS R5. Now, when it comes to Canon 1DX users, it's going to be a bit more difficult for me to tell you guys if you guys should switch or stick with 1DX. But the thing is, with you guys, especially if you guys have been investing within that 1DX lineup for such a long time, maybe you guys do have the original 1DX or even the 1DX Mark II, then I'd probably just tell you guys to go to the 1DX Mark III, since it will definitely be a much more of a familiar, you know, feel with the camera. You guys will practically know how to use it. And also, again, that camera does have some really great video features, like that 5.5K or I think maybe even 6K resolution. I'm not 100% sure. But again, if you guys are thinking about either switching, I'd probably just say stay with the 1DX. Obviously, if you guys don't want to spend another $6,500 on that 1DX body, then maybe it might be worth it for you guys to switch the R5 or even the R6 for that matter. But if you guys do have a ton of 1DX accessories, like a ton of 1DX batteries, since they are different from the Canon EOS R5's batteries, then I might just tell you guys to stick with the 1DX. But if you guys don't have too much accessories with the 1DX series, and you guys are thinking about the R5 or the R6, then it would kind of be worth it for you guys to switch. Now guys, another question that I got with the R5 is that should Canon users switch to Sony or a different manufacturer, especially with the R5's issue with the overheating and the recording limits. Now, as I said, one of the biggest reasons why I'm deciding to stick with the R5 is because I do believe that Canon can fix this camera. It just comes down to when the firmware updates coming out, and hopefully they will be able to fix some of the recording times with this camera, and also giving us some better dynamic range and better frame rates for us to use. So again, I would just say, especially if you guys do have a ton of Canon EF glass, a ton of Canon batteries, a ton of accessories, I would just tell you guys to wait right now just to see what Canon does with the R5 and the R6. If you guys already do have, you know, a lot of Sony glass as well, or if you guys do have that money to completely switch into a camera system, then again, going with the A7S Mark III isn't a bad idea. But my recommendation is just to pretty much just wait for Canon just to see what they do. Specifically with the R5, will they fix it, will they not fix it? Just wait and see, and after they come out with a firmware update, then you guys can either make that decision to either go with, either to stick with Canon or to change to a different manufacturer. Alrighty guys, so I know that video was pretty long, but that is pretty much all there is about the Canon EOS R5. Now if you guys have any more questions about the R5, make sure you guys leave it down in the comments below. If you guys enjoyed this video, make sure to give it a like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.